Welcome to AikiTalks. Real stories, real practice, real Aiki. This episode of AikiTalks is all about the Easter School, and because there's so much to get through, I'm breaking it down into several parts. Today we'll be discussing my reflections on the first day, or the first half day, of the Easter School held in Pembury, and the techniques and principles taught over those days. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone who has spoken to me about the channel, and you have all been very supportive and kind. I just want to remind everyone that these are my thoughts, and AikiTalks is not affiliated to the society. It's a personal project of mine. But as Shingitai is my society, I am going to mention it several times. Once again, the Shingitai Aikido Society has shown itself to be an excellent community, as the atmosphere on the mat was amazing, a really good vibe. I understand that there was a little social event on the first evening, and as much as I was sorry to miss it, I was in Cardiff that evening moshing with a group of gnome hat-wearing metalheads, but I heard it was an excellent evening. I'd like to thank all those I trained with, and especially those who travelled from up Blackpool way and down from Torbay and Plymouth. Let's get into it. Forgive me if I forget some details of the day, but there was a lot to cover. We started, as we often do, with a warm-up taken by Shihan Smout, whose energetic style set the pace for a good course. It seemed to me that there was a theme to this year's Easter course, but that being said, I know there is likely a theme every course Soke does, but as I was taking notes this year for this channel, I noticed it more at the time and not in later reflection. Soge discussed the relationship between Yuki and Nagi several times over the weekend. He started by building up a series of techniques that can be done in sequence. We first explored the harmonizing of Yuki's movements and continuing the circle over Yuki's shoulder to perform a Shionagi style Kokyunagi. This pure blend helped us develop our timing, as too late would need us to rely on strength, and too soon would result in not being harmonized. We then moved on to a Kotegish, with a focus on throwing down, not to focus on the prettiness of the technique, but the effectiveness of the technique, something Soke mentioned several times. Of course, techniques should work, and as much as a throw out for this technique would result in a damaging Yuki, this isn't in the spirit of Aikido. However, it would be an effective self-defense technique. We then developed the Kotegish into the sequence, with a focus on Yuki keeping hold whilst taking Yukemi, so the technique continues. Point I was considering how important it is for Nagi to follow Yuki whilst they do the Yukemi, to harmonize with the movement so both can ensure Yuki rises in readiness for the next technique. Once we had all got to grasps with the two consecutive techniques, Soke then added in Rokyo. Once again, we developed our understanding of this technique on its own before adding it into the sequence. Now, Rokyu can be a dangerous technique. It requires an element of hyperextension on the elbow of Yuki, as we all know. Again, this technique can be brutal if applied quickly. Soke reminded us all that a step back is required to ensure the technique bites. Of course, I was training with a brown belt student, and there was a notable height difference that made applying the technique to me as Yuki difficult, because of the length of my arms. However, with the correct rotation, the force can be applied in a controlled manner, that size compatibility was no longer an issue. Yuki and Nagi's size compatibility is a discussion for another episode, I think, because that is something that comes up quite often. The next technique to be added was a Sankyo. This was applied without the immobilization, but Soke introduced an alternative throw out of the common casting out that, if not timed correctly and in harmony with Yuki's reaction to the Sankyo being applied, it can result in Yuki walking out. Soge instead suggested that applying the throwing force back through the arm and into the elbow, effectively throwing the Sankyo back at Yuki. This reminded me of a Sankyo throw that Soge taught last year at the Penabont Aikido course, where Soge threw the Sankyo back, which was a similar feel, but yet there were noticeable differences. The feeling felt up and then down, whereas last time it was a move of a back and away. However, I may have just been getting it wrong the first time. We added all these techniques into sequence, allowing us to better understand the relationship of Yuki and Nagi in our training. Soge mentioned several times the relationship of mind and body, two key terms in our society's name. Soge used the story of Toei Sensei, where he was asked if he could move objects with his mind due to his understanding of ki and his mastery of mind over body, or mind and body, I should say. Soke continues with Toei's response, "Yes, I can," and where he picks up a glass and moves it across the table and places it back down. He then says, "I can move it back again too." Now, this story, after the chuckles died down, solidified the idea of your mind moves the object and your body is the means in which it is done. So Soke emphasized this concept of your mind must extend the ki or provide focus in the right direction, or even keep calm but alert to what Yuki is doing for your body to be able to respond and apply the technique. Sensei Mort took the last session of the morning. His technique, a classic Sensei Mort style of stepping across the line and into an Urimi Tenkan to take reverse Kodagishi. This quick change of leading hands for Nagi continues the circular movement for Yuki, allowing for a flow that is synonymous with Sensei Mort. We then mixed it up with Sensei Mort instructing a more traditional Kodagishi before moving into a Shiinagi-esque high reverse Kodagishi session with a classic Shingi-Tai Aikido Iriminagi. The high arm positions to control the head and a deep Urimi to behind Yuki is, as I said, a classic Soke Jones technique, and one Sensei Mort has mastered the application of. All Aikidoka in the Shingi-Tai society would recognize the strong Soke influence that this technique has. If you have enjoyed, please subscribe, like, and comment, and I hope you join me for part 2 of our Easter School reflection. Thank you for joining me for AikiTalks. Until next time, stay centered, keep training, and take care.